Fikes here again, your host of the iKnow Media Roundtable, where we bring you conscientious clarity through empirical experience alongside reasoned application and analysis. This is part 2 of the show about just talking about a little hope in reactions from some of my friends that I've known for years in response to the first presidential debate of 2020. How are you guys doing? What's up, Elisa?
Hey, I am here, Kenny. Hey guys, I'm Elisa Simmons and I'm a Montessori guide from East Texas, and we're just gonna continue this conversation about what we hope will get better.
Hi everyone, I'm Jay Ellis. I'm from Houston, and right now the show gives me hope, and the fact that people watch the show gives me hope. The fact that many people are willing to learn and listen to one another, and that gives me hope. And that's very important these days, because sometimes it's easy to get discouraged about the future of America.
Hi, I'm Michael Malabsky. I'm a pediatrician from Denver, Colorado, father of 7. And it's easy, I think, to feel discouraged and a little bit lost, I think, after the debate last night. But I take a lot of inspiration from this group right here. So whenever I feel discouraged, I simply think about being part of this esteemed group, and that always gives me a lot of energy and hope as well.
Awesome. So let's give some other people some hope. And we're not doing hope in the sense of praying and talking nice right now to bring us together. But what we're saying is, in at least a metaphorical war of ideologies, Black folks right now don't necessarily feel alone, because for a lot of us who've had mixed company for most of our lives, a lot of those people are coming in support. And so I basically cut and pasted posts from some of my white friends over the years that were talking about that debate. And I wanted other Black folks to hear this side, because so often we hear that other side of the people who are defending the president of the United States currently. And one of the issues has been that we thought complacency was a bad thing. And although there's always been, I'm going to use one of those terms I hate using like conservative and liberal when I talk about politics, but we've known people who have been liberal for years, but for the first time in my life, and I've always paid attention to politics. Actually, unlike you, Michael, I've always paid attention, and I like politics at some level. I've seen white people actually outraged, not just in support, but outraged. And so I'm gonna start with another quote that was on my line today. And this person wrote, "Seriously, have you ever felt so sickened? Our nation has never been close to perfect, but in our lifetime, this feels like a new low. It has certainly opened the eyes of my fellow white citizens to the evils that exist here, which many of us did not see before. It's Pappy's yellow, sickly underbelly. How can you say you love anything that you don't and won't?" Oh, that's good. That went to something else. So that's the end of that quote. I admire you, Kenny, for this post and for being you. Trump must go. The Proud Boys are in North Carolina and marched in Alamance County today. I will not even capitalize their name. They're pure hate, Biden all the way. It took a degree of courage. I applaud you for your conviction. Why don't you start us off on this one, Jay?
I'm glad that you have friends who feel that way about it and are willing to say so on social media. I think there are those people who feel that way but are kind of hesitant to say that because they know that they may face some backlash personally. And I would love it if everybody could be candid in that way, but sometimes they feel they just can't. And I think that that's okay, as long as they know how they feel about it. And when they get into that voting booth, they're going to remember. So you can say things all day on social media, but what we really need you to do is come out and vote, and then support the causes, the different causes in any way that you can. I know that I sometimes consider this, and I think right now, many of us as Black people, like, we'll come out and say, hey, where are my white friends? Like, what do y'all have to say about this? And sometimes we do that. But what we often don't do, and I think we should, I think this show is a good time to do that, is to say to those white people who are supporters, who are willing to put it on their Facebook page and face backlash from whoever in their circle didn't appreciate it, like, thank you for doing that, because you didn't have to. I think it's important to be grateful to those people who show up on our behalf, who show up to protest when they don't even have a monkey in the circus, and they're showing up to it and they're taking the risk of it, whatever that may be. I think sometimes we need to acknowledge that, and we don't always. I also think that it is important to say that it isn't just white people either who are disappointing us, right? Because every now and again, there's somebody who is brown, who says the most unlikely things and would just support the hell out of Donald Trump. I'm still having trouble understanding that, but there are those who are, I know you personally, of Latin descent, of Black descent, who will come out and actually defend him. And even after last night, right? So, but thank God they're in the minority. And hopefully he doesn't capture any more people with a wonderful platinum plan, because it's really important that we don't fall for that. But most important, we talked a little about unity on the last show, and we do see an outpouring of that. And there is unity that may not be vocal, but they're showing up and they're doing things. And so that gives me hope. That gives me a lot of hope, because that means that minds will continue to change, and then one day lives will follow. And I look forward to that.
So I don't know if anyone ever saw the series Shaka Zulu about the great Zulu warrior, but as they came in, so Michael saw it, as they came in, Europeans, and of course we knew hair, even something like dye for the human hair was not known to Shaka Zulu. And so one of the scenes was they'd been dyeing his hair for him when it was turning gray, and he was beginning to think, because his face wasn't really changing, just the color of the hair, that it was making him younger. And so later on in the show, he asked the question, how do you trap a monkey? Show him something shiny. And you guys know that's how you like the little apparatus that you put your hand in it out, so they put nickel in there. Well, I think the platinum plan is for those people you were just talking about, Jay Sharif. So I'm going to refer to those Black folks just like they used to in the Black church for people who can't sing. They say, that's all right. That's all right.
That's all right, baby.
Bless his heart. Bless their heart.
Bless your heart. Yes, Southern thing. Bless your heart. That's not right. Ever anything complimentary.
Right. So in the spirit of Martin Niemöller, Michael, and coming from your perspective, and we're trying to get some hope and inspiration, what do you think?
I believe that everybody has to accept the possibility that the election could absolutely simply put this person back in the White House. And despite that, there's a part of me that wants to believe that the experience of all of that we've had this year, especially since March, in terms of the thing that brought us together, this group together initially, was what? It was the shared national experience of all of us going through an unprecedented sort of awakening about, hey, there's something really going on here that all of us, regardless of what walk of life and what color you are, can all talk about and discuss and share with one another, because it's so overpowering and so big. And I think, and I hope that even if Donald Trump is installed back in the White House, that possibly that can continue, and that this can continue to grow, and that people will continue to marginalize. I was just looking up the Proud Boys. I actually didn't know anything about them. It sounds like they're just a proxy for the skinheads and the KKK. But that this will continue to be marginalized, and that the overwhelming groundswell will continue to be what is going on, like in this group, that this group is a microcosm for what's actually occurring all over, and what we're hearing about. And maybe it's not just little insulated pockets of left-wing liberalism like the New York tri-state area, but in fact is actually what average middle-of-the-road Americans who are from every walk of life really think and feel and really want every day. They want a better place for our kids and for our families, and this is part of it. So I want to believe that that's possible regardless of the outcome of the election.
Yes, some of the quotes I'm reading: Massachusetts, Texas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, North Carolina. These people I'm reading from that I know. What do you think, Elisa?
Do you guys remember the movie, going back to everybody's remembering stuff, the movie Higher Learning? Did any of y'all see that? I'm
I
frozen.
did not.
So the movie Higher,
So, are you there?
I'm here now. I'm here. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys. The movie Higher Learning, there was a character, Remy, and he was played by Michael Rappaport, I think, who's a Jewish person. And he was desperately trying to fit in. And he tried so hard and he wanted to fit in so well, he got looped up with some skinheads. And I think that that's like, sometimes I try my hardest to put the people I know who are Trump who are supporting Trump. I try my hardest to associate them with that character in hopes that they're just trying to fit in. And
So I think Elisa's being kind to some folks that she knows and is trying to see the best in them and reasons for it. I it looks like I'm talking over, but I don't think you guys can hear her either, right? So the next quote I'm going to read, Elisa, sorry you went out there, so I just started talking.
Okay, go for it, go.
So the next quote, this is from a young man, white gentleman here in Tennessee. He worked for me in my office in Chattanooga about 5 years ago. He was a senior in college down at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. Didn't have any real experience in sales, but I liked him and his character, and that's how I've always hired people I think that had character and smart and you can teach them. So he now lives in Nashville, white guy, 25 or so now, maybe 26. So he wrote on my stuff today, he wrote his age with the first two words, real shit. Hear a lot these days about getting along with people who disagree with you politically. And that's well and good, but as you stated, sometimes those differences cut to the core of who we are. And at some point, it's time to make a character judgment on those in our space. And by we, I'm not suggesting that I have been affected by Trump's rhetoric of policies in the same way that you have. And I responded and said, we're allies. You're outraged. To the degree, doesn't matter. That we're on the right side of the equation is what's important. Thank you. What do you think, Jay?
Yeah, I think that's one of the critical things that we need to think about as we talk about what unity really needs to look like. Remembering that so many of us are on the same side of the issue. It isn't just about racism, like it's about a lot of the isms. And it comes down to, are we all willing to fight to protect the humanity of others, whether that particular issue relates to us. Some of you might have seen, there was something that I reposted on Facebook, and I don't remember exactly how it goes, but it was posted by a friend of mine, and she's Caucasian. And she said, I have to remember these things, and we need to all remember these and check our privilege. And it said something like, vote as if your skin isn't white. Vote as if your son is not gay. Vote as if your home is not burning. Those kinds of things, where it's like, at the end of the day, we all want the same things. And we should be not just thinking about our own interests, that's very important, but what we want for ourselves, we should want for our fellow man. And so when we are choosing elected officials, we need to be thinking very broadly. Obviously, of course, race is a huge issue right now, but there are a lot of other big issues. And many of us are all on the same side of all of that, right? So what do we need to do to kind of just get our shit together and get to the polls and elect the people, not just this one president, because he can only do so much if he truly is limited by the power of the Senate, power of the Congress. What do we need to do to make sure that if he gets into office again, that there are true checks and balances for him? And so I think that we have to keep all of those things in mind. Race is critical. I want to see that resolved, but there are a lot of other things that shouldn't fall by the wayside. When we get together, we need to be on the same page about all of those. I don't want your house burning down because you live in California and there are wildfires going on all year long. I don't want your house flooding because you live in a place where you're in a flood zone and your community is not taking care of your infrastructure like it needs to be. So every time there's a hurricane, your home may flood. I don't want to see that happen for people. And so how do we start to just galvanize ourselves around a platform of just humanitarian effort for one another? I think that at some point we need to figure out how to do that, because we remain somewhat divided around issues and we're not working together like we could, I feel, in general, most of the communities. So I think we got to figure that out.
Well, I appreciate that rather astute analysis. I think race, you know, some people go, well, why are you guys sensitive? It's not all about race. Well, you know, you guys have heard me say it before. Theoretically, it isn't. But in the United States of America, I guarantee you a whole lot of things are about race and a whole lot of things are about money. And race happens to be the one that's a huge dividing line at the moment, not just because this person is in the White House, but because people have been complicit and watched him. And we've decided and understood that racism isn't a deal breaker for people. So it's sort of the last horizon on tolerance with this guy. And that's why I think race is such an important factor here. So it is, I think, the next level of understanding and loving each other is what you're talking about and caring about each other. But if you can't even get past someone's skin tone or their gender, you certainly aren't going to care about whether they live in a flood zone or it's arid where they are in there and they're in it's a fire hazard. And so, you know, I think in the spirit of people who have been on sports teams or people who have been in the military and had each other's back for various reasons, or, you know, I don't know, I've never been around a table operating on anyone, but I would imagine that when you are physicians and you're trying to save someone's life and do what's good, you're not like, yeah, I'm not sure he was black, I'm not going to take that advice, right? So it's funny, right? But the reality is that some people believe that nonsense. So segue into you, Michael. What do you got?
You know,
did we start with you on this one, Michael?
Yeah, you did. So go to Elisa.
Elisa, I'm sorry. It's you, Elisa, now. Sorry about that.
Oh, well, no. Don't be.
Well, I think she's having some issues again. So, Elisa, we're going to go back to Michael.
So I was thinking about something that came up in my Talmud study group. We were talking about many of you guys, I'm sure you people, everybody's familiar with the golden rule, right?
Got to interrupt you 1 second. We don't assume that people know things. Of course I know. Tell me what the Talmud is.
So the Talmud is the compendium of what's known as the oral tradition that goes along with what would be the written tradition, which is the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, right? The Old Testament. So Jewish people have an entire oral tradition that goes along with it. The relationship between the 5 books of Moses, the Torah, and the Talmud would be the same relationship in a newspaper between the headlines and the article and what's written in the article. So what we consider the headlines would just be what's, you know, you guys have seen a scroll, the written Torah scroll, or, you know, that we look at that as that's the headlines. But if you want to know what really is going on and how to interpret it, you've got to go to the Talmud, which is the oral tradition. That's now written down, but it was acquired over thousands of years and written down. And there's a discussion about the golden rule, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. It's actually stated twice differently in the Talmud. It's stated you should love your neighbor like you love yourself. And what is hateful to your neighbor, what is hateful to you, don't do to your neighbor. And the discussion around that is how can you tell someone really, how can you tell someone to feel love for another person like you would love yourself? That's impossible to do. No person can really intellectually, honestly say that they can, no matter how noble their intentions, like they love and esteem themselves, love their neighbor or their friend. You can't do it. What that's supposed to mean is not that you should feel the same love for them that you would feel for yourself, but that just what you want for yourself, for your family, just what you want for your success and your stability and your safety, that's what you should want from them as well. That's how people should treat each other, that you should have that not necessarily love, because you can't love someone like you would love your wife or your children. You can't love your neighbor that way, but you can want for them all the good things that you want for yourself. And that's why we look at our relationships with other people, not in terms of rights. In America, we're talking a lot about rights. Our tradition talks about obligations. Everyone has obligations that they're supposed to live up to. And if everyone focuses on what their obligations are, everyone's rights are automatically preserved. You don't have to focus on rights if everyone focuses on their obligations.
Yeah. Great lesson. Elisa, how are you doing now?
I think I fixed it, guys. Sorry about that. You know what? I think that if Trump gets reelected, I think for me, my personal life mission is going to be tuning out. Not because I don't want to be involved, because I really do. Kenny, I'm like you. I like politics. But there comes that infection that can seep into you and affect your aggressiveness or hostility towards others. And I'm really good at being hostile, and I'm really good at being aggressive, and I have to protect myself from going to a place that I choose not to go to. And I think if Trump wins again, I'm going to tune out from politics and really try to tune in more with the world around me and my effect on that, counteracting what his inspiration is to the Proud Boys and to the good old skinheads in this area and to the rednecks in this area. I'm going to have to try to reach the people I can truly touch and stop focusing on the craziness that this man brings.
Yeah, and one of the things that I wonder sometimes with the racism, we know that it's sort of a sickness, you know, if you have, I've said it before, to feel tall, you know, someone else has to be on their knees. But what I wonder sometimes is about the hurtful part, the spiteful part, the mean part. In other words, if I didn't like a person, you know, just to be silly, I'm going to make up a color, right? If they were purple people, if I didn't really care for purple people and I didn't like them, well, okay, that's my prerogative, I guess. But what's with the deal when I want to hurt them? What's with the deal when I want to do them harm? What's with the deal when I want to, you know, shoot someone or yell epithets at some point? So, yeah, I don't get that part. I had a guy that worked for me once. He was in Texas, and the first kind of sociopath I think I'd ever run into, and I think the only one. But we think of sociopath, at least I do. I'm not a doctor, right? But at least I do. Not someone who hurt. We think of them as people who hurt people violently, but this guy was a pathological liar, and he wasn't only stealing from my company, he was trying to hurt me. So like he was trying to make financial transactions that would ruin me. Like I didn't understand that, right? And that seems like that's what racists are like. Like if you don't like someone brown or black, why do you want to hurt them? Why do you want to do something against them? I don't get that whole thing. So you know, which is totally the antithesis of what you're talking about, Michael, with the golden rule. Jay, what do you
got? I mean, I think that some people just are cruel. And there's a good chance that those people who would set out to harm a particular person or a particular group of people, they're probably not very kind to anyone. It's just that they target certain people. You have bullies. But we also know that a lot of that is rooted in fear. And a lot of people don't identify their fear. Their fear masquerades as anger or self-righteousness, judgment, and aggression. But they don't recognize that it's coming from fear and ignorance, because somewhere along the line, they have been told that you're going to take something from them or do something to them. Your presence, just your presence, is a threat to them. And they don't process it as, I have this fear of this group of people. Why do I have this fear of this group of people? Is it credible? Because it's so automatic. It's so subconscious. And I think, you know, we've talked about before that at some point, to try to eliminate that, it requires an education, but the person has to be teachable and open to being educated. So unfortunately, there are many people who are not, and there are many people who are just cruel people and like to see others suffer. And unfortunately, our present commander-in-chief appeals to that side of human beings. Those people who love to be mean, who love to just see that you're hurt, that you're discouraged, that they possibly destroyed you. They're people who really feel good about that. And they're not nice people to begin with. We become the targets because Donald Trump says it's okay. He says it's okay for Muslims to be the targets. He says it's okay, you know, for the case of the KKK and the Proud Boys, anybody non-white, anyone who's non-Aryan, let's say, can be the target. It's perfectly fine. And he's gonna, and what did he say about the people in Charlottesville? Oh, there are people on both sides, right? And so he told them it's okay. So now we get to see the worst of it. A lot of what we see is probably very reminiscent of the pre-civil rights movement. And so in my opinion, when he said, make America great again, that's what he was talking about, trying to bring us right back there. And there are people who are ripe for that. But we overcame that to a large extent years ago. And so that gives me hope, because they overcame that without the benefit of technology. You know, some of them had phones. They didn't have answering machines. They didn't have computers and email and text messages. Somehow they organized themselves in smaller communities and then in bigger communities and nationally, and they changed the Constitution. And so if they could do that without all of the resources that we have today we have more status, we have more money, we have Black people who are very well educated and in positions of power. I mean, come on, we got a Black female running for vice president, right? So God knows we have the wherewithal to do it. We just have to, at some point, get beyond our fatigue and remain angry, but not so angry that we can't act and can't think. Because it's easy to get that way and kind of get mired down into all of that craziness. But it gives me hope, because this was done before with people who had far less and people who were far more oppressed than we are today. If this show could have never existed back then, if we'd had the technology, the cops would have been at our door arresting us at the first show. And then somebody would have burned a cross on our lawns like at the second show. Somebody would have thrown a firebomb through the window if we tried to do the third. And so we get to have this show. Like, that gives me hope, because we can continue to look forward to change. It's just going to be a lot of work and a lot of sacrifice.
Yeah. Well, we asked each other if we've seen certain movies and stuff. There was a band of comedians called the Kings of Comedy, and Cedric the Entertainer has a line that starts with "I wish," and so yeah, we also have the ability to protect ourselves a little more these days. And yes, we're talking about hope, but what Jay Cherie, again, once in her eloquence went through was educational. So you have to point out the problems to talk about hope. You can't sweep it under the rug. And so with that said, we're still on this hope kick. And what I want Michael to speak to in a second is, as a Black male, I feel directly in the line of fire. But what does it feel like as a Jewish person in terms of what Trump is doing and galvanizing in terms of his base and giving them licensing? And I'm gonna throw some hopeful comments in there again that were from some of my white friends that wrote today. One person wrote, he was absolutely unwilling to denounce white supremacy. He had no idea how to even fake it. What a mess. We need to mobilize and remove him. And the other comment is a separate one on a separate person. It's just straight to the point. Joe Biden straight called Trump a racist to his face, and he straight ignored it. Let that sink in. What do you got, Michael?
Well, I think as I mentioned in the last show, I think the Jewish community feels it in a way in the last year or two, way more than we would have admitted in the last 20 years, because I think every major synagogue around the country, any place where there's any large gathering of Jews, now include armed guards with open carry weapons. That's foreign to us in this country until recently. And that really comes from one place. It comes from the Proud Boys, white supremacist ideology. You know, Jayshree, you were talking about, and Kenny, you mentioned, it's so hard to understand how people, if you didn't like someone who's purple, you don't like someone who's Black, it's hard to relate to the idea, as opposed to just not liking them, why to feel the need to hurt them? Where does that come from? And, you know, I think Jewish people have spent a lot of time thinking about this, because there's lots of people who witnessed the atrocities at Auschwitz and Birkenau and lived through it and wrote about it. And, you know, Viktor Frankl, Elie Wiesel, And what it comes down to in that experience is that, simply put, Jewish people weren't considered human in the usual sense to those people. And I believe more than fear and more than feeling threatened in terms of my possessions or feeling threatened in terms of, we're being replaced, I think it's really not acknowledging basic humanity and feeling that group of people, where that comes from, is more based simply in a complete lack of feeling that these people, I share any sort of common humanity with them. They're below humanity to me. So therefore, it just feels natural to treat them this way. And I think that's a direct reflection. These groups all carry the Nazi flag as much as they carry the Dixie flag. It seems it's hand in hand, because they relate to that ideology. None of them have read Mein Kampf. I feel very comfortable. None of them have.
Yes. So I don't know
Have
why
read that. Is that
we don't. Yeah, more people should talk about that. I mean, in the law, there's this concept of negligence on down to gross negligence and liability and joint and several liability. If the four of us lived in condos that were connected and there was a fire started in my house, and then it went and burned Elisa's house, and then went and burned Jay Cherie's, and went and burned Michael's, there's a point at which the indemnification sort of ends, or the liability ends. But we know that one thing is connected to another. And I think journalists are not doing a good job of getting to the real story sometimes, because if you looked at a rally and say, click, there's the American flag, click, there's a Confederate flag, click, there's a Nazi flag, and show what that really is, at a certain point, there's got to be some humanity where people are shamed and they're not allowed to tell these stories in silos, like they're not putting them all together. Elisa, you are a teacher. You can chime in with whatever you want, but one of the things that one of my friends wrote also was this one simple line. She wrote, "How does a parent explain the behavior of the president to their children?"
You know what? For me personally, I've had this conversation with a few students who are trying to digest what they're hearing. And one of the easiest ways for me kids are way better than adults. One of the ways that I try to do that is hurt people hurt. And as a child, it's easy to understand that if someone feels small, the easiest way to feel bigger is if you make other people feel small. And that's how I explain Donald Trump to students who choose to come and talk to me. I stay pretty political neutral in my classroom, but students who need to talk something out, I try to say, hurt people hurt. And my great grandmother was the person that I know personally who lived long time ago. She's dead now, but she said these little things to me that have always stuck to me. And one of the things she said was that whatever you hate in life will become your hell. So if you hate nothing in life, you can never go to hell. And I think that some people need to think about that you're giving all this energy to things that have nothing to do with you or nothing to do with you yet. And you're trying your hardest to stay on a team. And that anger, hate in your heart will consume you too. Like it will change how you treat real people, because you've decided so much to be on a team that does not value you other than that you take up a spot and make it look like they have a big team.
I like that. What you hate will send you to hell. And if you don't hate anything, you won't go to hell. Wisdom. Yeah. There was an older Black woman in Oklahoma, and I used to date her daughter. And this is deep. A mother of a daughter said this to me. Her daughter and I would argue, and this is a woman who's aware of who her child is, because she's saying it to the boyfriend. She said, "Kenny, don't let her send your soul to hell." In other words, my daughter's mean as hell. So like, don't let my daughter send your soul to hell. Or was her way of saying, maybe you need to get away from her because she's kind of mean, and I see you changing a little bit. Yeah. So I'm going to end with this in this time of hope, just to point it out, something for people to think about. We've talked a lot about those sort of ignorant Trump supporters. I got it right this time. It was Arkansas Michael, where they were sort of losing their minds and hate. And in this show, we've talked about some hope of white allies, regular, normal Americans who are outraged. I'll tell you who I'm not hearing speak out a lot. And it's a terrible analogy, but I'll go to the analogy next. But there's some of those blue blood people that I know that are the extreme wealthy, who's tried to talk about policy and talk about taxes and money and
Yeah. I think it's true that we aren't hearing from those people at all. And so it's kind of interesting to say, are they in it because of political gain? Because his point of view supports them in this life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no question that as someone who owns and runs a small business, I know Kenny does also, you know, there have definitely been policy advantages that have helped me, at least on a money and bottom line issue. And I think that, you know, you can scale that all the way up. I'm sure that people who are dealing in a much higher level financial scale are feeling the effects of that too. And that's really hard when you are to turn away from and stand on a value when you are benefiting tremendously from a financial standpoint. It's really that's a very difficult thing for people to do.
Yeah. I think go ahead, Jay, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, I think it is, but you know, at the end of the day, with those people, I think I would have more respect for them if they said, listen, when it comes to my family's business, our enterprises, this is how much we lost in this year, given these tax laws, and he's made it possible for us to get this, that, and the other. We think he's absolutely repugnant, but what he does financially benefits my family. So I understand that level of angst, right? And that person may very well get into the voting booth and decide that that is the most important thing.
Right.
But not hearing anything leads you to believe that it doesn't bother them at all. Like, at least if you're a friend of mine or you know me, say that you have conflict about it. Like, I feel like this fool does not need to lead our nation, but we lost this much money before, we made it back with him, and his policies work for us. We can now start having an honest discussion. Like, I'm not going to be mad that you want to preserve your family's wealth, because I wouldn't expect you to want to throw it away, but say something. Sometimes the silence, right. You get to assume anything. And because the things that he does and the policies that he supports are so outrageous, to not hear somebody who otherwise you believe to be a reasonable individual come out and say, that guy is a jerk. Like, say that. Because if you're not saying it and it's so obvious that he is one, or worse yet, you start making excuses for him being a jerk, then it seems like you're okay with everything that makes him ugly. And then that means that you are okay with him oppressing whomever he's shown that he's willing to oppress. So I think those people, and you know, people who are wealthy, blue bloods, they might not put it on social media because they really might have a lot to lose in doing that. I get it. But for people that they know who would be on the receiving end of the oppression, yeah, just say, hey, you know, this right here is not acceptable. I just want you to know, like, I don't think it's okay. Because I think that we have to be reasonable in our expectation of how people show support. You don't necessarily have to put it on social media to show that you are supporting.
And I think Michael may agree. Michael may understand this a little bit. I know that for me personally, I have the luxury of you choose to come to my school. And so at the end of the day, if you don't want to come to my school, don't come to my school. But I think a lot of people may be afraid of the current climate with cancel culture. And is it going to affect them financially because they're going to be canceled out and someone's going to attack them? We've seen that, guys. We've seen where if you say something borderline against a group, that group comes in and attacks and tries their hardest to ruin your financial stability. And this is on both sides, ruin your financial stability and ruin your name in the community and your business's name in the community. And that is something to be fearful of, especially if it's not as easy for you to switch communities or switch jobs and your livelihood is gone because you chose to share your political view.
100%. And I think as a person, pediatrics is a service industry as much as it is a medical practice. You know, you guys are parents, right? You're not pounding down your pediatrician's door necessarily for deep medical advice. You just sometimes need your form signed or you need your checkup scheduled, and it's a service thing. And so, yeah, you have to think about that. I'm not always so quick to share necessarily deep personal convictions because, you know, I just don't want to put that out there because I don't want that to be a factor in people who are choosing to use my services because I need them. And I just, you know, I put up a post about at Pride Month. I posted about families dealing with the emotional trauma of their kids when their kids have gender identity issues, and how to, you know, the most important thing is to forge emotional connection with your kids and not to isolate them and not to, not to treat them as sort of outsiders within the family. And then whatever happens, your child will have a healthy relationship with you, and that will support a healthier, whatever the transition is. I had Christian families leave the practice over that because they were saying that I was endorsing being gay, and that they interpret that the practice is going to help my child be gay. Someone said that to me. So like even something that seemingly didn't have any controversial thing about emotionally connecting to your kids, people will take that and filter that in the way they want. So yeah. We're not so quick to share my feelings and thoughts on these.
And I think Kenny, we were talking about the fact that we think that might be why a lot of people who know that their opinion might have the bottom line against their dollar. Their opinion may bottom out their dollar. And so with the current council culture, but then also, are they benefiting from his policies? And if they're benefiting from his policies, it may not be worth it. Racism might not be their deal breaker. Being broke is their deal breaker. And so they don't want to do it.
Well, actually, the people I was talking about have almost a zero chance of being broke. They're like the true blue bloods, like from back in the day. And so the analogy I was going to make, what goes with some of that arrogance is I've heard some of them make the argument. There's two analogies. The first analogy is if I was playing in a sports game that had 4 quarters and the third quarter just ended, and then this person ran into the gym and got on the bench and said, okay, let me tell you how to win this game. And I said, whoa. Here's what's going on in the last 3 quarters. That arrogance to believe that they can walk right in and tell us what to do is what they do with black people. They say, no. Biden is the racist, not Trump, as if I haven't been black all my life and I don't recognize it. They fight tooth and nail. And so here's the other analogy. They fight so hard for it that they sell out for it because of who they are, and they benefit from those being one of those like a 1%er of the 1%ers. And what that says to me is because they benefit like that and they're willing to go with it, these are the same people that would press yes for slavery to keep what they have. It sounds like a reach, but I don't think it is. Yeah. And that's a problem.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, we need everybody who chooses to watch this and the previous episodes to do their civic duty. And in November, late October, vote. Make sure that your vote counts. Do not be the person that fills in Kanye West's name. Do not come to me and say, I did not vote for Trump. I wrote in this name. Because if you do, we all know that the only 2 decisions right now are Biden and Trump. And if you make the decision not to vote for Biden, you are making a decision to vote for Trump. And I think we have to get everybody out there, vote vote legally, make sure your vote counts.
Well, thanks for keeping it going, guys. I think it's been about a little over 40 minutes now for our 30-minute show, so we probably want to wrap it up. Got something, Jay?
Keep hope alive, and hope is election day. That is hope. Be there, no matter what you have to do. Try to get there early so there's nothing that stops you from voting. Try to vote the first day of early voting in case you happen to die a week later, because we need to vote.
Keep hope alive. Jesse Jackson, 1984. Stay out the bushes. That's what he said. All right.
Don't die
Michael,
without counting.
I got something for you. All right. Take care.
Good night.
Hey,